The Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast. We are continuing our team-by-team preview series here, and we are asking you right now to hit that like and hit that subscribe button before we dive into this week's show. In this week's show, we are going to talk about the Detroit Lions. Yes, the Detroit Lions are back to relevancy here in the National Football League after finishing 9-8 last season. And more on that record, they were 5-4 at home, 4-4 on the road, and over the last 5 games of the season, they finished with a 4-1 record. Now, how did they get this done? They were scoring points with the top offenses in the league. With the number 8 ranked passing offense, they're averaging 251.8 yards per game, and their run offense was 11th, averaging 128.2 yards per game. That was a top 5 scoring offense. They scored 453 points, while they gave up 427 points last season. Looking at this defense, they were 30th in passing defense, allowing 245.8 yards per game, and their run defense wasn't any better, allowing 146.5 yards per game, which was 29th in the league. Now, the Detroit Lions, they were America's sweetheart, from hard knocks to just missing out on the playoffs. In fact, when they stepped on the field in Green Bay in week number 18, their fate had already been sealed. However, in true Dan Campbell fashion, the Lions figured if they can't go to the playoffs, neither should Aaron Rodgers or the Green Bay Packers. Being that close to the playoffs ignited a fire in this fan base, one that continues to burn well into 2023. Detroit sported one of the top offenses in the league, led by Jared Goff. Yes, you heard that correctly. Jared Goff, an offense that produced 380 yards per game, which was the 4th most. Detroit knows if they can get anything out of this defense, if this defense can step up just a little bit, they are going to be bound for the playoffs. We know what this offense is capable of doing. The 2023 playoffs and that NFC North Division title, they're well within the reach for the Detroit Lions this season, which is exciting. Now, when I talk about excitement, I look at these camp battles for the Detroit Lions. I'm excited to see how the targets, how the carries get divided up between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. How are the Lions going to use both these backs? At receiver, we know that Jameson Williams will be allowed to participate in camp, and he's going to be suspended for the first 6 games of the season, which means after amon-ra St. Brown, after Jahmyr Gibbs there, someone has to step up in this passing game for the Lions. Will it be Josh Reynolds, who caught 38 passes for 479 yards, or will it be Khalif Raymond there, who had 47 receptions himself, or could it be Marvin Jones, who returns to Detroit after a short stint there in Duval County? The last time back in 2020 that Jones wore the Lions uniform, he caught 76 of 115 targets. Now, he's not the same guy that he once was, but he's pretty good. He can still get the job done, let's be honest. Heading into 2023, Detroit needs to replace 227 targets, most notably from the loss of DJ Chark, TJ Hawkinson, and DeAndre Swift. Looking back to the draft, Detroit selected 2 players that certainly should help with that vacated target problem. First off, round number 1, pick number 12, Jahmyr Gibbs. Then in the second round, pick number 34, tight end Sam Laporta. In between there in the first round, they selected linebacker Jack Campbell. And then the second round, they went again, safety Brian Brancher out of Alabama. And the third round, pick number 68, they looked towards Hendon Hooker as a potential replacement to Jared Goff, even though he's like a year and a half, maybe 2 years younger than Jared Goff at this time. Hendon Hooker's like 30 years old coming out of college. Looking at some of these offseason acquisitions here, some of the adds, some of the losses here to this Detroit Lions roster, you got to start at running back there with David Montgomery, cornerback Cameron Sutton, cornerback Emmanuel Mosley there, guard Graham Glasgow, safety CJ Gardner-Johnson, linebacker Reeves Maven. On the other side of that coin, we know that DeAndre Swift was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. We know Jamal Williams signed with the New Orleans Saints. Deshaun Elliott, DJ Chark, linebacker Chris Board, guard Evan Brown, and cornerback Mike Hughes are no longer in the Motor City. So what was the best move that the Lions could have made this whole offseason? It was addressing the problems in the secondary. This pass defense ranked 30th in the league in yards allowed. They also allowed the 3rd most points to wide receivers in fantasy, allowing on average 36.2 per game. Receivers would go on to haul 228 passes for 3,238 yards in 2022 against this Lions secondary. Those numbers are the main reason that Jeff Okudah is elsewhere, why Cameron Sutton, Emmanuel Mosley, and CJ Gardner were brought in. The Gardner-Johnson addition is key for this whole offseason rebuild of the secondary after picking off 6 passes in just 12 contests for the Eagles last season. Gardner-Johnson can play safety. He can drop down to the nickel, which offers some flexibility for this Lions defense. Now, the worst move, sometimes you just have to go up there and get your guy. I've never been in a war room when it comes to the draft, but the selection of Jack Campbell at 18 certainly felt like a reach to me. The Lions would like Campbell to come in right away and start alongside with Alex Anzalone there and James Houston, but it's far from a guarantee. Let's not forget that Derek Barnes will be even more fired up to compete for a starting role here on this Lions defense. Now, I'm predicting a Lions season to look something like a 10-7 record. Yes, that's right, double-digit victories for the Motor City Lions here. Detroit just needs to continue on this path that they are currently going down. If they can hold things down offensively until Jameson Williams returns, then this unit will be leveling up when he comes back to that lineup. Expect Jahmyr Gibbs to be lined up everywhere on this field, from the backfield to the slot, even outside, creating mismatches all over the field. David Montgomery, he's more than capable of running the ball between the tackles, and guess what? He's not a bad pass catcher himself. So you know there's going to be times where Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are both on the field, and they're both going to be options in this passing game, which again was one of the best in the league last season. Then looking at the additions on this defense, particularly in that secondary, this Lions defense should be much improved. They have 4 players capable of playing safety in Tracy Walker, Kirby Joseph, Gardner Johnson there, and Brian Branch, and the latter of the two have the versatility to come down and play inside the nickel. Now, when we talk about flexibility, we know that this Lions defense has created some flexibility. Flexibility on the defense and flexibility in offense means flexibility in fantasy. With an offense that ranked top 5 in terms of yards per game at 318, points per game at 26.6, you know you're going to have players producing in fantasy. So here are the top 5 fantasy assets for the Detroit Lions. At number 1, it's amon-ra St. Brown. St. Brown saw 146 targets in an offense that had the 3rd most yards and the 5th most points in the NFL. In just 2 seasons, St. Brown has 2,073 receiving yards, 196 receptions, and is just one of 3 players with 8+ catches in 8 straight games, and was the first player in NFL history to record a touchdown and 8 catches in 6 straight games. Gibbs comes in here at number 2. He is one smooth criminal here, and he's one of the most dangerous backs in this entire draft class, especially in the open field. I think he's even more dangerous than Bijan Robinson when he gets to that 2nd and 3rd level. Detroit will be using Gibbs not only in the slot, but out wide, much like he was used at Alabama, which is going to create those mismatches everywhere on the field. It's going to open up things for St. Brown. It's going to open up the underbelly for David Montgomery to rush, and you can't guard Gibbs out there with a linebacker, and you definitely don't want to put a corner out there. So, hey, what are defenses going to do? At number 3, it's David Montgomery. Montgomery and Gibbs can coexist in this offense. Montgomery will be playing behind a much better line in Detroit than he had in Chicago, a line that averaged 1.81 yards before contact a season ago. At number 4, it's Jameson Williams. Sure, he's suspended for the first 6 games, but drafting Williams in fantasy is a move for the second half of the season. Gibbs and St. Brown, they're going to draw the attention, while Williams, he's going to take it off over the top. Touchdown to check down, baby. And number 5, the man orchestrating this whole thing, the man behind center, Jared Goff. Imagine how good this offense would be if they played all their games at home. Goff was 2nd in passes over 20 yards with 57, and he was 6th in total passing yards. In weeks 13 through 18, Goff's deep ball rate was 96.8. You better believe that this offense is poised to level up in the second half of that season. It's not 100% clear who that one Lions player is that you have to roster in all your fantasy leagues, but I am all in on amon-ra St. Brown. I'm so in that I think he is that receiver that who's sitting outside the top 5 that could challenge for the wide receiver 1 crown here in 2023. It's St. Brown who caught 106 of 147 balls thrown in his direction, and that includes that week 4 contest against the Seahawks in which St. Brown had missed. On a target per route run basis, there only Tyreek Hill had a target share greater than St. Brown's 32%. And if you look at the strength of schedules, then you'll really be into St. Brown, who faces the 11th best fantasy schedule for wide receivers in 2023 with favorable matchups while Jameson Williams is absent. Then it gets even more favorable during the fantasy playoffs where that schedule ranks 7th. Now, the biggest bust on this Lions team, this Lions offense is going to be good. I do have some reservations, though, whether or not Jared Goff can repeat his 2022 performance again this season. Goff was solid, throwing for over 4,400 yards, completing 65% of his passes. He did a good job protecting the ball, only throwing 7 interceptions while tossing 29 touchdowns. So why the doubt? Well, 23 of those touchdowns came at home. The man, he was money in Detroit. In those 9 home contests, Goff only turned the ball over 3 times times and had a passer rating there of 109.3. However, on the road, Goff's rating would drop to 87.4, where he threw only 6 touchdowns in 8 games while being picked off on 4 occasions. Now, the best fantasy value on this Lions team, everyone is excited about Jahmyr Gibbs, and rightfully so. He's going to be a good player, but it's making people forget just how good David Montgomery is. Back in March, Montgomery signed a 3-year, $18 million deal with the Lions. If you believe that the Lions got their guy in Jahmyr Gibbs at the draft, then you should also believe the same thing about Montgomery via free agency. The Lions' backfield is one that can coexist at the same time with Gibbs and Montgomery offering very different skill sets to this offense that will allow them both to be present on the field together. Between Swift and Jamal Williams, and let's throw in Justin Jackson in there too, the Lions' backs combined for 403 carries and 93 targets last season. That's a lot of opportunities. When looking at the offensive line, Montgomery, he actually gets an upgrade in that department, which is great news for a back who's averaged 4 yards per carry. And the fantasy sleeper, what is old is new again in Detroit. That is especially the case when looking at a sleeper. After catching 76 passes with the Lions for 978 yards back in 2022, Marvin Jones saw those numbers decline in Jacksonville. In 2021, Jones was solid, hauling in 73 passes for 832 yards, but found himself behind Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, and Zay Jones last season, resulting in just 46 receptions for 529 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, I talked about those vacated targets earlier. Jones should see plenty of them funneled his way. If you aren't excited about the prospects of this Lions team heading into 2023, are you really even living? Before Dan Campbell, only 3 people ever got me excited about Lions football. That was Calvin Johnson, Barry Sanders, and Axel Foley. And that is it for this week's show.